What's up? Welcome back to my channel, or for the first time if you're new, I'm Sylvan, and today I'm going to be reacting to the Genshin Impact animated short, Memories of This Life. I'm very intrigued by this. I did not realize we were going to be getting this. This came out of nowhere, but it seems like it's going to be about Capitano based on the thumbnail, and though I will admit I haven't gotten around to doing the 5.3 story yet, I do exist online, and I am a Capitano enjoyer, so I unfortunately am aware of a few things that happen, I'll say. So I'm not going into this completely blind, but I may not have necessarily all the details that this might go into. But either way, I'm excited for this nonetheless, so feel free to like and subscribe if you enjoy the video, leave a comment on your thoughts, and let's get into this. What do we got? Okay. Visuals are really interesting. Are we supposed to have a voice right now, or is it intentionally silent? God. He's so cool, I love him. Fighting alongside the Natlanese. Fighting a ruin guard, how poignant. Asking Capitano why he fights. Oh, so he's faced that before, or perhaps this is in the big fight during 5.1. Yeah, okay, this was during that fight. I don't know if it was actually meant to not have any sound, but it's very interesting. Just silent like this. Huh. So I'm imagining this might be a moment in the story. Unfortunately, like I said, I haven't done it yet. So I'm going to be suffering on the actual analysis here in context with the story. I'm just going to read through, give my thoughts on the dialogue here. I don't see anything in the description about missing voice, so I'm imagining this was an intentional choice for there to not actually be any spoken dialogue, just the subtitles and the music, which is interesting. So we start by opening on a battlefield on Natlan, fighting against the Abyss. Capitano and his unit, potentially, before he had fully been afflicted with the curse, or at the very least, early enough that he was still largely the person he was beforehand. I find it cool to, even if it's just from a distance and sort of vague, see more detail of what presumably Conrian soldiers look like. It seems like they have more like full plate armor almost, with helmets and everything, and the like visor of the armor is actually very sort of Star Wars Mandalorian, which is interesting. It makes me excited to see if we'll in-game ever see anything with this design of armor. But as we get the visual of this, we have the line, "I have never sought war, and yet it always comes." As the earth breaks from underneath him and claws up at him, grabbing onto him and distorting his form, clearly a representation of the toll of the curse of immortality. And it from there transitions to him now with the mask, still on the battlefields of Natlan. Now based on the appearance of Mavika later in this, presumably during the battle in the Archon quest. And it's here that he leads the Fatui into battle, effortlessly fighting off attacks, destroying waves of Hilichurls and Abyss monsters, but they keep coming. And it's here where then we begin to have lines that are essentially spoken to Capitano. They are questioning Capitano's motives, asking why an outlander fights here in Natlan. And it's with these lines that we have one of the Abyss creatures taking the form of a ruin guard, which I feel is very poignant. The form the Abyss creature takes when fighting Capitano is that of a Conrian creation. I don't think necessarily that was an intentional choice by the Abyss to face off against Capitano in a Conrian form, but I think it has a level of irony and poetic nature to it. And of course, this also can be levied against him fighting Hilichurls, but I feel it has a bit more of an impact and relevance when we're dealing with a creature that can take any form, compared to the Hilichurls, which are more so victims of circumstance that then are compelled by the Abyss in some way. I don't know, it's just interesting to me to consider. It doesn't necessarily have any major relevance or import, but I don't know, I just feel it fitting and interesting. But the questions continue. Why do you fight? Why do you bleed for us? You are an outlander. You are not of Natlan. Why do you fight so hard for us and our people? And as these questions continue, he finds himself surrounded by the beaten and battered soldiers around him, both the Fatui and the Natlanese. But he walks forward unstopped, unperturbed. He will continue to fight even if no one else can. He grips his blade, and though I can't confirm because we don't have the actual dialogue of the voices to know who's talking, I imagine that the rest of these lines are Capitano's answer to that question. Why do you fight for us? Why do you bleed for us? Why do you sacrifice so much for Natlan when you are not of Natlan? And his response is such. For all the beings of this world, heroes of 3 nations, him and his now long gone unit, heroes of Conria, the people of Natlan, heroes of their own land, and the Fatui, heroes of Shneznaya. The heroes of 3 nations come together. For all beings of this world, the heroes of these 3 nations, they march forth without fear. Capitano recognizes that the threat of the Abyss is far greater than any one nation, that if Natlan falls, it is merely the first domino in the destruction of the world, and he has dedicated himself to stopping that. For the sake of all those who live in this world, who live in Teyvat, he refuses to let the Abyss get a foothold any more than it already has. And so he rallies the fearless, the heroes of all who will listen. He will lead them marching forward without fear into the Abyss to stop it. And it's with this that he marches up to the throne, looks back at Auroran, Sitlali, Mavika, and us, and he takes his seat, and ice bursts out from behind it, firmly holding his blade, as he is, I presume, enveloped in ice, and then we fade out from there. I imagine that I would probably have more context and potentially more to actually say about this if I had done the story yet, which is sort of tragic. I might do a follow-up video on this if I feel like I have more to say once I get around to doing the story. I'll probably be doing it in the next day or so anyways, so if I decide to do that, it won't be long from now. But for now at least, this is a relatively straightforward animated short. I'm a big fan of it. I really like the Capitano highlight. I appreciate it. And it makes me curious whether, given his fate at the end of the story, whether this is meant as a almost memorial of him, or if it's a sign that his story is not yet over. I personally would love if his story wasn't over. I would love if he becomes playable and that he continues to be relevant to the story, but I do not necessarily know which one it is. I know which one I prefer, as I've said, but I could see either option. Yeah, at the end of the day, from what I can gather at least of this, it is a fairly straightforward glance at the reason Capitano fights. It doesn't get too in-depth on it, but effectively from this we're able to gather the fact that, as it says, he has never sought war, but it seems to always come. It seems to always find him. He can never get away from war. In part, perhaps that's because he has the power he does. Because he has the power to fight in these wars, he feels he has the responsibility to help those who don't have the power to protect themselves. It is clear from both how he acts in the story, as well as the brief lines we have here, that Capitano is a deeply righteous person. He does what he does, he sacrifices so much for the sake of the world, of the people who live in it, with no clear sign of expected compensation or reward. And I'm a big fan of that. I absolutely love the really classic righteous martyr knight type vibe that he has going on. And once again, I would be really happy if there's more to his story, but I also am not one who would be particularly angry if his story ended where it does. But with that, I shall leave things here. So if you enjoyed this video, feel free to like and subscribe and leave a comment on your thoughts, and I hope you all had a great day, and goodbye!